Gentlemen, it's good to be with you this morning. And Rich, appreciate your introduction, your kind introduction. Well, I'm a little tender this morning because my wife of 31 years is literally 2 blocks behind that cross on just one of those Eagle Streets, which is right here in the neighborhood. And her mom, my mother-in-law, for the last 31 years, has been battling ALS. And if anybody has faced that terrible disease, you know that it just deteriorates and tears apart and dismantles your entire body. And so I've watched my mother-in-law die, basically, over the last year. And I just got a text from Stacy, and she says she's in her final breaths, gasping even now this morning. And so I'll probably literally run from here 2 blocks over to see if I can catch her this morning. But I appreciate your prayers for my wife, Stacy. And it's never easy losing a mom. Never easy losing a dad. It's never easy losing anybody. I lost my mom 15 years ago to breast cancer, and I still remember her legacy and the rich heritage of faith that she's brought to me. And so this morning I come to you a little bit tender, but also I'm going to dig deep and not quit and persevere and be tenacious with the word that I believe is for all of us this morning in my session. I've also got around to the room today some of my kids. I have 5 kids, 3 girls, 2 boys. My son John is here, and I'm grateful that he woke up and got out of bed to come this morning. When you're 24 and your fiance's in town, it's the last place you want to be is here. But if he gets up and leaves in the middle of this, we know why. But John, proud of you. Glad that you're here. And my dad's here. And then I have 2 son-in-laws that are here today. Some of you know Chris Buck. He's the executive pastor here at West Salem. He's married to my first daughter. And, I could tell you stories about that. But we're grateful for Chris. And then my other son-in-law, Louis Claude, who is married to our second daughter, Becca, is here. So we have some of my family here. Can you give them a warm welcome? As Rich mentioned, this weekend, Stacy and I, we drove up from California, Sacramento area. On October 31st, we landed in Salem on November 1st. It was our first weekend. We had our 5 kids, our U-Haul truck, our cat, our dog, and all of our stuff, pulling the trailer, everything, and we landed here 20 years ago. We've raised our kids here. They've all gone to school at Sumter and Judson and Sprague High School. Now we're empty nesters. They've all gone on. They've all finished their college degrees. 4 of them, are married, and our 5th, John, just got engaged. So it's just a different season of life, and we're rejoicing and celebrating with that. I want to thank West Salem for hosting. Rich, I appreciate your father, Faith, not because, again, your age, but just because your heart for men, and that we all need dads, and we need dads in the faith, and I appreciate your heart for guys. And Pastor John for hosting as well. We have something in common as well. We share 3 grandbabies together. Your oldest and my youngest daughter are married and have produced the joys of our life. And we're pretty excited to be able to partner in that. And my youngest daughter and his oldest son are married and have given us 3 there. One of my kids, one of his kids, some interbreeding in Salem. There was some, it's a 4-square thing. I mean, it's something. And some of you, let's wrap it up. Amen. That's not my message today. Also sitting on the front row, a guy that some of you know and some of you are going to get to know here later today, and that's Pastor Robert Flores. And he's about a decade ahead of me in years, but I got to tell you, he's been a guy that I have modeled my ministry after. He's came to Salem 25 years ago. I know that West Salem is celebrating that tomorrow. We are celebrating 20 years, so I'm just 5 years behind this guy, and I know you've got just a wonderful wife and a wonderful ministry, and I want you to know how much you have empowered and mentored and coached me from a distance, but also when we were here together during your 14 years, so excited to hear you this morning. So blessings to Pastor Robert today. And how about to all you guys, men from the valley? You didn't have to be here. You woke up, you chose to come here, and I know the coffee's good, and I know the worship's good, but you didn't have to be here. You could have been in a lot of different places, and so I'm proud of you. Way to go. You could have been hunting. You could have been sleeping in. You could have been doing so many other things, but you chose to come this morning. Well, my task this morning is to transition from teammates to coaches. And this morning, a coach could be a mentor, a counselor, an advisor, a pastor, a spiritual director, so many different ways. And keeping with the athletic theme today, my questions for you this morning is, who's your coach, or who are you coaching? Or both. Who's your coach and who are you coaching? This morning, as we kind of keep it going with some of the famous athletic themes and stuff, I wanted to throw a couple other maybe familiar faces up on the screen. Let's start with college football, since we're in college football season. Let's go to the famous Newt Rockne from Notre Dame. That's Bill Bowerman, not Newt. So Newt Rockne, many of you know that he was a legend, and he's what helped start kind of get the college. Eventually, we'll get in sync. And then there he is. There's Newt. There's Newt Rockne, and some of you would agree that he's one of the best college coaches of all time. Now, I don't have pictures for all these guys, but and I say this name, and you're going to probably boo, but you got to admit that he's pretty good at what he does. Nick Saban. I mean, he's good. He's good. Whether you like his tactics or whether you like his team, doesn't really matter. He's a pretty good coach. And then there's guys like Bear Bryant. We'll go a little old school. Remember Bear Bryant? I think only my dad maybe is the only guy here that would maybe remember Bear Bryant. There's others. There's a more recent one that I'm kind of a fan of. A guy's name, Mario Cristobal. Anybody ever heard of him? He's doing pretty good down in Eugene. Go Ducks, 5 o'clock today. I'm glad we organized this whole event around the Ducks schedule today, and that was a wise move. So there's some familiar and famous college football coaches. How about NBA? Who would you say are some of the most famous, popular, best NBA basketball coaches of all time? I heard both those names. Survey says Phil Jackson and Pat Riley. I mean, they're good coaches. I mean, you got to give them that because they're records, because they're players. There's just a lot of reasons why they're fantastic. Okay, I don't know if anybody we have any hockey fans? Any hockey fans in the room? Okay, so one poll said not because of his winning season, but because of one in particular Olympics in 1980. This guy is the greatest hockey coach of all time, Herb Brooks. Remember when we beat the Russians? It was some of you are old enough to remember that. All right, now, some of them already popped up, but in the NFL, you already know, Bill Walsh, 49ers, team of the decade of the 80s. It was just amazing, so many good things. Of course, he had Joe Montana, and he had Ronnie Lott, and he had some incredible players. But we know that the 49ers coach, Bill Walsh, did a pretty good job. And then, I don't know whether you like him or not, you got to admit that Patriots coach Bill Belichick, he's done pretty good. He's done pretty well. He's okay. Yeah, that's only in honor of Pastor Robert Flores that I have that guy up there. Tom Landry actually invented the defense that over 85% of NFL defenses have used since its inception. I didn't know that. The modern day 4-3 defense, that was Landry's brainchild. And but he also invented the flex defense as well. With these two innovations, Landry was capable of fielding the infamous Doomsday defense. Anybody remember that? That helped lead the Cowboys to 5 Super Bowl appearances and 2 wins. And the Cowboys currently have the number 2 defense in the NFL. So your boys are doing okay. They're doing all right. Not as good as the 49ers, but they're doing all right. Or the Packers. You know, head coaches, there's one more that just a little old school, just wanted to throw. You see him up on the screen is the Packers coach, Vince Lombardi. Vince Lombardi, you know, who we have the Super Bowl trophy, is named after him. He said one time, it's not whether you get knocked down, it's whether you get up. I'm grateful that you guys got up this morning and that you're here this morning, because I don't want to talk just about coaches that are famous on the field. I want to talk about coaches that are important for our lives. But just a couple others, because oftentimes head coaches get all the attention. But what about those offensive coordinators? What about those defensive coordinators? What about all those assistant coaches? I mean, they make the team, and they help kind of buoy a winning record. If I were to ask you today, who is the number 1 defensive coordinator or who has the number 1 defense in all the NFL, does anybody even know? Survey says that's the offense. There's the answer for the offense. The chief. Defensive coordinator, this guy named Gus. But you didn't know Gus. Do you know Gus? Anybody know Gus? Hardly anybody knows Gus. But Gus is leading his team in the number one defense in all the NFL. And you saw the answer to the best offense right now, currently in the NFL, and that's Chiefs offensive coordinator. His name's Eric B. They're all doing pretty well. Well, in an online survey of best coaches, none of these, though, made number one. In fact, let's just play a quick game of sports trivia, see if you can guess the number one coach of all time. And I'm not going to give you right at first what the sport is, but let's see if you can guess it by some of his quotes. Do not let what you cannot do interfere with what you can do. Never mistake activity for achievement. Failure is not fatal, but failure to change might be. College basketball, 10 NCAA national championships in his 12 years, 7 in a row at UCLA. You said it, you know it, John Wooden. Some would say in online polls that he's the number one coach of all time. I can give you a lot of reasons why, but a winning record would also help depict why he's number one. But he was also more into the character of the player than just the results on the stats on the floor. Well, just to wrap it up this morning with one more coach worth mentioning in our great state of Oregon, a respected track coach for the University of Oregon, an innovator and co-founder of Nike. You saw him earlier up on the screen. He trained 31 Olympic athletes, 51 All-Americans, 24 NCAA champions, and during his 24-year career, he only had one losing season. Bill Bowerman. Now, men of God, Coach Bowerman taught many how to pass the baton on the track and field. But there's a guy in the Bible named Paul who also did the same thing. He didn't pass a track baton, but he passed a spiritual baton. And this morning, I would like for us to consider in this athletic theme of this day, what about you, what about me, passing the baton? Passing the baton. So I have a couple today, and we're going to do that this morning. And I'm not just going to say, good luck, catch the baton. We're going to talk about how to pass and receive the baton this morning. Well, my theme scripture this morning is out of 2 Timothy 2, verse 2, and we might have it up on the screen. It goes this way. And all that you've learned from me, confirmed by the integrity of my life, pass on to faithful leaders who are competent to teach the same revelation. Gentlemen, we have an opportunity to, yes, run the ball. Yes, to throw the ball. Yes, to have teammates, and I think it's important that we have teammates in our life. But I also believe we can coach, mentor, advise, direct, counsel, and raise up the next generation. And we can pass on and help others come to know Jesus as their personal Savior and help others find the faith and keep running in the faith. So there is an element of us being coaches. Well, maybe you, like me, had a childhood coach that made a difference. I played Little League, and I wasn't a very good Little Leaguer. I played basketball, I played football, and I was never really good at any of those kind of things. But I was, fortunately, during my high school years, pretty good at one thing called Taekwondo. But the only reason I was good at Taekwondo is because, one, I was flexible. I had a pretty good kick. But ultimately, it was because of my coach. My coach, Tom Long, was an incredible instructor. He was probably like a wrapped-up Bill Bowerman, Tom Landry. I mean, he had all these different skills and all these different ways to work with young high school guys like me and some of my other guys in my dojo to help us understand not just how to break boards and not just how to have round-offs and special, kicks and punches, but to be the men of God early on that he was calling us to be in our gis. And so I got to advance through the white belt, yellow belt, and all those different things. And I never made it to black belt because I quit a little early. Yeah, well, I went to college, and I didn't do Taekwondo there. But I'll never forget Tom Long and his emphasis and his mentoring and his coaching and his investment in me as a young boy. Anybody have anybody in their life that have invested in you in your younger lives or in your current lives that made a difference? And the Tom Longs that are out there make big differences in guys like me. How about teachers or professors? Guys like Dr. Howard Hendricks or Nijay Gupta, my seminary professor at Portland Seminary, or Dr. Delmarter, my Old Testament professor, or my 4th grade Bible school teacher. She brought Elijah alive. I mean, how do you bring Elijah alive? I mean, Elijah's kind of a crazy prophet. And yet, by the end of that class, I wanted to be just like Elijah because of my fourth grade teacher and how she brought him, that character, off the page. There are people in our lives that can help illustrate and help us want to be more than we think we can even be. Coaches, teachers, professors, or maybe even pastors. Let me just list some of these and show some on the screen. You've heard of some of them: Billy Graham, Rick Warren, T.D. Jakes, Tony Evans, Charles Swindoll, Stephen Furtick, Craig Rochelle, Francis Chan, Tim Keller, or a Northwest guy, Roy Hicks. And these 10 pastors who I just mentioned have certainly made their mark. Or your pastor, your current pastor. And are you letting them make a mark? You know, there's coaches and there's pastors and there's different people in our lives that we can glean and get direction from. But I don't want to only include pastors and teachers and professors. What about business guys? I see in this room today some very skilled and talented guys that we could look up to and could get coached by. I see Tim Weiner. See this guy right here. There's so many other guys in this room, business guys, that we can model our businesses, model our characters, model our lives and our business plans after. So what I'm saying is you can learn from a lot of different people, right? Men of God, what I'm trying to get at is that there's a question that we should be asking ourselves. Who are the people who have helped make you the man you are today? Who are the people that have helped make you the man you are today? The people that have marked you, made a significant impact, a lasting impression on your life. What men in your life have passed you the baton and cheered for you, have said you can do it, have said I believe in you, and hopefully you've had somebody. And if not, by the end of today and moving into the future, you will find somebody. You'll have somebody. Well, one of the people that has made an impact on my life is kind of obvious for those that are a part of our fellowship and our church at Gateway, is a guy who, he was a part of making me, biologically. Now, I want to honor my dad. He's 82 years old, and I want, Dad, if you just join me up here, come on up here this morning. What I'm about to talk about with coaching, mentoring, advising, discipling, and raising up the next generation, you would think, well, at 82, it's a good time to retire, settle in, do the things that you want to do. But my dad at 82 actually models for me still to this day how to mentor, how to disciple, how to lead, how to raise up men at 82. Now, if I went into some different examples in the scriptures like Caleb or others, you know that you're not done. One of the things I appreciate about my pops is that he's not a retired guy, he's a refired guy. He knows what God has called him to do, and he's going to probably do it till his dying breath. And Pops, I want to honor you and just give tribute to you in front of these brothers this morning because you have left an indelible mark on my life. You have impacted me and my marriage and my child raising and my grandparenting now. We have our 7th grandchild will be here in 2 weeks. And so that means you're a big great-grandpa. But the way that you model and mentor and raise up people is fantastic. And so I wonder, as a patriarch to our movement and to the men of this room and in this valley, if you just take a moment and just blast them with some truth and just give them a little bit of why is it important to mentor and why is it important to disciple and coach people's lives all around us.
He loves to catch me off guard. This is when I heard about it. The best thing I could say it's our destiny. It's our true vocation. It's not our avocation. It's not when we have time. It's because we make time for what our passion really is. And probably the number one thing, it's so simple that we too often miss it, is that what being disciples is the common word we use, and it's the biblical word, is that it takes time, and it's what we don't want to spend because we're too busy. And just to be transparent with you, is because we're so, we're not a mixed group, but we're too damned egocentric. We're too self-centered. We're too selfish. And we're always thinking about what I'm going to do and what my agenda is. And that basically rules out, honestly, discipling men. I'll give it a shot when I have time. Call me when you want to have coffee, or maybe we'll get together sometime. Or that's about the level of discipleship for many, just being friendly on Sunday morning. Discipleship is a love affair, and it's a love affair that doesn't happen just between a man and a woman. It happens between the people of God, and that's who we are. And so we just need to be who we are, people that are being gelled together, being woven into the fabric that is called God's kingdom. It happens to be the second sentence of the Lord's Prayer. And so that alone makes it authentic and very important. So the first thing I say to my guys that are my sheep is you want to take the time. And you usually know after 3 or 4 months whether it's for real or not, because 4 out of 5 will fade out. And not because you want them to or because I run them off. It's because they just don't want to spend the time. They don't want to get that real. And usually by the second or third month, you're getting pretty down and dirty. And you're looking at each other's real life. And they just don't want to do it. So what we need to do, if I give you a homework assignment, that it's my favorite book beside the Bible. And if you would read this book and read it, it's the only book I've read more than once. It's called Andrew Murray's Waiting on God. Waiting on God has done more to influence my life to what real discipleship and following God is really all about. And it's all about, in day 25 of this little 31-day devotional, he says it beautifully that really hit me. He said, I'm learning to sink further into my nothingness. Well, as men, you know that is totally contrary to the Americana way. We have been taught as men to be somebody, make something out of yourself, be independent, and take over, take charge. Well, in the kingdom of God, the way that happens is just the opposite of the way we've been trained in our culture. The way to take charge is to die, to die to ourselves so that we can be alive to other people. So I'm getting on my stump, so I'll ease off. You get it?
That's good. Thank you. See, you're better when you're just on the spot, because then you just go. I love it. Yeah. Plus, you were a pastor for 50 years, so you're kind of used to it. Did you just catch the baton? Some things were passed right there from a patriarch in our movement that we can't miss, because mentoring and discipling and coaching is not really optional. I mean, it's mandatory. It's an essential. And so we've got to do it. And we have that opportunity today to pass it, but also to receive it. Proverbs 27:17 says, iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. But that means you got to get close. To get sharp, it means you got to ching, cling, crash, clash, have conflict. It all has to happen by being close. And I know you're sitting around some guys that maybe have made you sharper, stronger, faster, better. And that's part of what Rich was saying this morning, is to have teammates. But it also applies for coaching, mentoring, advising, to be able to pass that and to receive that. Howard Hendricks once said that you can impress from a distance, but you can impact up close. Look, I can try to stand up here and try to impress you, but my best ministry will be up close and personal. It's in those heart-to-heart exchanges, not just the head-to-head exchanges. It's in the passing of the baton that's close, where we can maximize those moments together. And I encourage and invite you into that relationship, because last time I read the Gospels, Jesus does the same thing. I mean, Jesus chose 12 men to live side by side with, and with these men would become his greatest impact. I mean, you wonder, we're sitting here today because of the impact of 12 guys. And so there's 200 of us. What will our impact be when we pass the baton to the next generation? So this morning, passing the baton happens up close. Paul did it with Timothy. In fact, in 2 Timothy 3:10, look on the screen, you see in his second letter to Timothy, he points out that you know what I teach and how I live and what my purpose in life is. You know my faith, my patience, my love, and my endurance. Paul models it for Timothy, and then Timothy goes on to do exactly that. And my challenge for myself, as I would submit to you, is your life full of enough purpose and integrity and faith and patience and endurance for others to catch in your life? You see, one of the best things about my dad's role modeling for me is that I want to be just like him. Not that he's a Duck fan, and now my sons are Duck fans, and he's passed on that Duck thing. Some would say that's an essential. But I would rip this duck off my chest. I would rip it off my chest and exchange it for the heart of a man of faith. Because it doesn't really matter what your colors are, green and yellow or black and orange. It matters that you bleed red and that you bleed the blood of Jesus in your life, and that's passed on from generation to generation. And so that's what I model and take from my pops is, yes, I was born and raised in Eugene and went to all the games when the Ducks lost. And so we celebrate the current season of victory. But they'll lose again. But I'll always remember that Jesus has won and continues to win in my life. And so it doesn't matter if my favorite team or my least favorite teams are winning or losing, because I don't live my life based on my favorite team. I was at a service recently, a memorial for a guy who was the biggest Duck fan. And everybody in the memorial continued to say about him, oh, he's just such a big Duck fan. He loved the Ducks. He loved the Ducks. And I got me thinking, was there anything else about him? Like, why didn't anybody say that he loved Jesus as much as he loved the Ducks? And it got me thinking at 51 years old that I want to be a success and I want to be significant for who I am in Christ more than who my favorite team is. And so something to think about. Paul sets the pace with his life and challenges Timothy to learn by keeping up and emulating his lifestyle. You probably heard that people say that Christianity is always one generation from extinction. I think that might be oversimplifying it, but the fact is that no generation is exempt from the call to fulfill the Great Commission or to serve God's purposes as fully as possible. But the men in this room, we can help be a part of the solution. The next generation is always watching, so we get a chance, an opportunity to set the pace and to pass the baton. So let's apply it. In my closing time today, I just want to share some applications. Some applications that hopefully we can put into play when we walk out of this experience, this encounter, this event today. Application number one is, dads, you got to start at home. You got to start at home. Your number one disciple is your son and your daughter. You could be number one at your office, and that's admirable. That's noble. But do your kids know that you think they're number one? I realize that in my life with raising 5 kids, 3 girls and 2 boys, with all of us who just have that default in us that we want to succeed and we want to make a lot of money and we want to do a lot of things, that becoming a pastor and delaying the call on my life at 28, realizing finally after going to school and doing different business endeavors and going after different dreams and different sales things, different whatever, that God put a call in my life to be a pastor, and I delayed it. I didn't want to have anything to do with it because I wanted to make a lot of money, and I had 5 kids, and so I knew I needed to make a lot of money. But at age 30, I moved from California into Salem, Oregon to take a small church and started pastoring. And to be a pastor, you got to be crazy. I mean, you got to be foolish and you got to be crazy because there's just so much. Like, okay, I'm going to use all the rest of my days to save souls. Like, who wants to do that? A certain few. and what God's called you to, whether it's pastoring or missionary or ministry or being a businessman or a salesperson or whatever it is, let me just tell you that first and foremost, it's about your family and your kids. So if you're a dad, be a dad first and make them your number one disciple. Pass on your faith to your kids, not your fears to your kids. Pass on your godly habits, not your bad habits. Look, hi, my name's Greg, and I've got some vices. Hi, my name's Greg, I've got some addictions, some bad habits, and some hurts and some hang-ups. But I do not want to pass those on to my kids or my grandkids. I want to pass on faith, not fear. I want to pass on the things of God to my kids and my grandkids. Now, I realize that you got to be vulnerable and transparent and open, and you don't just hide all your stuff, but we have an opportunity to make our kids our number one disciples. So some recommendations, because maybe you're wondering if you have little kids, or kids still in your home. One of the things that Stacy and I always did, we started the day with Bible at breakfast. And I'm not talking about like we preached at them, but we just had memory verses and we had scriptures that we would share with our kids during breakfast. And at dinner time, we would reflect on God's goodness. We did highs and lows. What good things is God doing and you're seeing? And what are some lows and some tough things? And we opened up conversation. All this was mentoring. All this was disciple making. All this was coaching my 5 kids. And at bedtime, well, we told stories and we prayed. You know how I know how to pray? Because my dad, when I was a kid, prayed over me. And it's amazing that I pray the same things that my dad prayed over me when I was a little kid over my kids when they were kids. And I wonder if my son-in-laws, and I wonder if my daughters, and I wonder if my kids will end up praying some of those similar things over their kids, my grandkids. What are you passing on? Pass on faith. Pass on prayer. My son's here today, and I admire his achievements. I admire his personality. I admire all the things that you're doing. I just got engaged. You're learning how to figure out a fiance from a distance and all the things that are involved with that. But if I were to pass on a baton to you, son, it would be this. And all that you've learned from me, confirmed by the integrity of my life, pass on to faithful leaders who are competent to teach the same revelation. That I would learn how to pass things on to you so you could pass them on to others. Because you can be 51 or 24 and still be able to pass something on. So today, as we pass some batons today, what is it that we're passing on? And how is it that we're passing them on? To make it even more practical today, because some of you might not have kids. You might not have families. I know Pastor John's going to talk about the general manager and the spouse here in just a minute, but could I give a strong plea for raising up the next generation, and that maybe you would prayerfully consider going to your pastor or your kids coordinator at your church and become a Sunday school teacher. Come on, the Bible sometimes likens the Christian life to a race. Hebrews 12:1 says, "Run with perseverance the race marked out for you." However, the Christian life is not just about me running my race alone. It's more like a relay race, and our mission is not just to run well, but to pass on something to the next generation. So what if we passed on that baton of faith to our kids? If you're a churchgoer and you're a Christ follower and you've got a spot and you're serving in that, continue to do that. I'm not saying to jump out of that and to jump into to something else, but I would put a high value on children's ministry because we have an opportunity to reach them. By the time they're 13, they're more likely to receive and accept Christ in their life. They're less likely to fumble the baton of faith in those early years. So pass that on, and maybe that's to be a Sunday school teacher. It could be one of the greatest and best things that you do. We have a guy here in our connection at Gateway, John Strom. I mean, you're in your latter years, you've retired, but you teach Sunday school all the time. And with your wife, you're passing the baton of faith on to this next generation of kids. And the way that you do it with passion and perseverance and the way you do it with tenacity, and it's just amazing. And I know that young kids are coming to know Jesus because of your faith and because of your ministry. Thank you for passing the baton in children's ministry. We need more John Stroms. We need more children's ministers. We need more Sunday school teachers. Now, I know you got to pass a background check, and there's some other things like that, so there's some importance. So I'm not talking to maybe everybody, but, Application, one more. Start with your kids. Pass it on to your church. but another is to support your pastor. Support your pastor. One of the unique roles that I have is I'm the area pastor for this Willamette Valley, so we have 22 churches. Many of you are here, and so my role is to coach, to care, to come alongside, to help with transitions, to be there for a lot of the pastors here in this Willamette Valley. And as a guy who's now served 20 years and still is trying to figure it out, I know that the support of men goes a long, long way. In fact, this morning I just want to highlight the area pastors that are in the room, and so if you just would stand to your feet quickly, just Woodburn, Sweet Home, Corvallis, just stand all around the room. Senior pastors that are here today, West Salem, Dallas, Woodburn, Philomath, Sweet Home, Corvallis, Monmouth, Albany, all these guys, Lebanon. These guys right here that you see, yes, they're human and full of humanity. But there is an appointment on their life that's divine. And God's called into something that's not a solo act. It's something that they need your support. And so in just a few moments, we're going to be praying and laying hands on them. But could you just notice these guys and then think about these things that I want to offer to you practically. So go ahead and you can go ahead and be seated, guys. Because if I were to ask each of these guys, how can the men of your church best support and encourage you? I mean, what would some of the things be? Here's some of the things I would say. Show up. Just show up. I mean, we vote with our feet. Our presence and our participation go a long way. You just show up, and that goes a long way to supporting your pastor. Show up on time. I mean, you could show up, but then you show up on time is another part of it. Listen to their sermons. Don't hear their sermons, but listen to their sermons. If you got to sit in the front row, if you got to lean in, if you got to slap yourself awake, if whatever you got to do, listen to their sermons. This might seem obvious, but there's few things more discouraging than to look out to a group of people that you're preaching to and see a mass of adults with the attention span of a 4-year-old. So when you listen, or even go into the mythical realm of actually note-taking, you are offering a sign of solidarity with the leader of your church, the pastor of your church. Your actions are saying that you believe what they have to say is valuable and is worth your time. Try it tomorrow. But also, maybe give them feedback from their sermons. It's one of the most difficult jobs because you don't get the feedback from the preach. The next time you give your pastor encouragement, make it specific, not general. Make it direct. But bring the attention to God and what God did through them in that message. You know, Pastor Scott, God taught me. God blessed me through your message today, and this is how he did it. Speak specifically. Instead of at the back of the room just saying, good preach, or nice message, or keep it up. You might also consider the following. Give him encouragement after the mediocre sermons. I mean, not all of us are John Phalons who hit home runs every single time. Because the mediocre sermons are going to happen on a high percentage. I mean, think about it with baseball. I mean, if you have a 400 batting average, that's pretty solid. Think about it for a preacher. I mean, if you can go 4 out of 10, most people will leave your church. So in those mediocre sermons, reinforce that God is speaking through him and making his work fruitful. And maybe that just means you show up on time and you just take notes. And maybe you don't have anything else to say, but just give them that look like, I'm here for you. Maybe consider writing encouragements in a note or an email. I have one of the guys at our church, and it just goes without a Sunday, and he just sends me a text of encouragement, and specifically how the message, what it meant to him. And that's about the only feedback I get every week. It's important. I mean, you get job performances at your job, right? Well, in the pastorate, you don't get a lot of that kind of stuff. You usually get it with either people come or they don't come. So, men of God, I'm calling you out. One of the ways to pass the baton is to support your pastor and figure out ways to do that in a healthy, good way. A couple other quick ones is I would ask you, men of God, to elder up. Yeah, elder up. Listen, a church cannot be a fully healthy church without elders. We see that Timothy talks about it, Titus talks about it. Elders are so important that it's one of Paul's first apostolic decisions in the churches that he established from place to place to place. He appointed elders there. Now, I don't need to go into doctrine or theology, but I know this. In Proverbs 15:22, it says, with many advisors comes success. And so pastors lean on other leaders, and leaders who have a call towards eldership, step up, because the church needs men to partner with pastors for the advancement of the kingdom. I mean, I could pass batons with fellow guys like Pastor Sandy Vandegrift, David Brown, Daryl Borello, Lee Morellis. There are elders and leaders at Gateway that are helping carry the call and the advancement of the kingdom. Because I can't do it solo, but we have guys that are doing that together. Pass the baton with eldership. And finally, pray for them. Pray for them. I know that sounds pretty obvious, but daily, don't just say you are, but actually do it. And we're going to do it here in just a minute. Pray for him personally, with his walk with Christ, with his study time, with his family time. Pray for his family. Pray for the things about him that bother you. I know that's not the case at Gateway, but I mean, there might be some things. Pray instead of complain. Pray for God to do exceedingly abundantly all you could think or imagine through him at your church, because God's called him to that place. Pass the baton. 2 Timothy 2:2, which is on each one of these today. And all that you've learned from me, confirmed by the integrity of my life, pass on to faithful leaders who are competent to teach the same revelation. You've learned and gleaned a couple things today, and I would encourage you to pass it on, because every man needs another man to cheer, believe, and stand side by side with. Mentoring is a must. It's not optional. It's essential. Don't die and be buried in your coffin with your baton left in your hand. Make sure you pass that baton here and now while you're living. All those area pastors that stood just a minute ago, I want to invite you to stand back up, and we're going to take the next just a couple moments to pray for those guys, to stand with those guys, to support them. They pray for you. Could we just take the next few minutes and pray for them? So all around the room, back up, Lebanon, West Salem, and Monmouth, and Independence, and all the different senior pastors that are here today, stand up. We applaud you. We give you our full support. We love you. We're praying for you. We believe in you. Thank you for passing the baton to us. We want to receive that and run well this race. Thank you for emulating integrity. We bless you and speak life over you and your ministries. So, fellas, this is where you get to elder up. This is where you get to stand up. This is where you get to rise up this morning. So all around the room, just begin to gather. Huddle up. Create little huddles. Get in the huddle. Start calling the play. Start praying right now this morning. We'll come back in just a few moments.